everybody, and welcome to the Smoko podcast. My name is Alexis Armstrong, your host. Nice to meet you. The Smoko podcast is the place to celebrate and highlight women, trans women, and non binary folk working within STEM and trade occupations. So please tune in, take a break, and join us. We are on Smoko. And today we are extremely lucky to be joined by Rachel Bourne, who is a female driller. I was already fangirling to her beforehand because it's been my dream working in geology to meet a female driller. I have yet to do so until today. So I'm just really excited for her to be on the show. She specializes in geotechnical and environmental drilling services. She does rock coring, mud rotary, air rotary, and augering. She went to school at Fleming College in resource drilling and blasting program. She works as a driller in the construction industry. And we're going to talk about how she became a driller. What does that mean? What does that look like? And everything about the industry. And again, this is just a huge highlight for me because I have yet to meet a female driller until today. And the amount of people in geology, my friends and colleagues that reached out and were like, oh my God, who are you interviewing? What's happening? It's just been pretty cool to see. So Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. That interview or the introduction was crazy. I feel like I don't even need to be interviewed now. There's my whole highlight of my career.
No, there's so much more that we can get into. But I really wanted just to highlight how cool it is and just how special it is for people in the industry for what you do. And maybe if we can start there, because it is very rare for women to be working within drilling. And I just wanted to know your story. Like, how did that happen? It's very rare. How did you become exposed to this? How did you know you wanted to be a driller? Did you stumble into it? Was it pre-planned? Like, how is that story of you entering this field?
So it all started when I was in high school. I wanted to pursue art. That was always my dream. And then getting into it and getting closer to graduation, I was kind of debating, is this really what I want to do? I don't want to lose my hobby. And I was just kind of feeling stuck. So I was already kind of thinking about trades, but I wasn't really sure the direction I wanted to go. And Fleming College came to my high school and they talked for about 30 seconds about this program called drilling and blasting and just about how much money you can make and how it's 90% employment rate right after school and all these things. And right away I was like, you know what? That sounds so cool. And it was in my fashion class. It was a college-based program, and my parents and me had already discussed going to university as my future plan. But yeah, I was in my fashion class and I told all the girls that I was in fashion with, I said, I'm going to go do that. And they were like, what? And my parents were like, what? What do you mean? So my parents were like, okay, obviously you want to do trades, but nobody in my family had ever done any sort of trade. So I was going to be the first person out of grandparents, parents, everything to want to go and do this. And it was just kind of like, are you sure this is the direction you want to go? And then they went to Fleming, they saw the program, they saw everything. My dad actually encouraged me to take the blasting program first and then do the drilling program after.
Love it.
So they were very supportive after, but they were right away very concerned, I guess. But if they hadn't come to my high school, I probably would have never even thought about doing it.
Wow, that's crazy to see. Like, it's crazy to think back that one moment like that could completely change your life. That someone's decision to be like, should we bring in Fleming today? And of all the marketing places to be like, you know where we should go? We should go to the fashion class. That's the one that we should hit. And we should go talk to the fashion students. That's so such a 180. You could have never thought that that was your story or that's your journey. And I love that initial kind of shock, but then the journey that them also becoming super supportive and your dad being really geeking out about blasting and them having your back ultimately in the end. How was that transition? You made this discovery of Fleming exists. There's this program that exists. As soon as you step foot in Fleming, was it an instant click, or did you have moments when you first started of being like, I'm supposed to be in fashion school right now? What am I doing? Learning about augering. How was that?
Yeah, so to be honest, when I was touring around the different schools, universities, college, because my parents still took me to universities, they took me to a private fashion university, just are you sure? I was taking private sewing lessons, I was sewing on the weekends, that was my entire life. And then just all of a sudden, I just want to change to something I have no idea about, right? So my parents took me and we traveled around the different areas and the different schools that I wanted to apply to. And then just the more that I visited colleges, the more comfortable I felt. And I didn't feel like I needed to look a certain
Hmm.
way or dress a certain way. It was more relaxed vibes. The
Hmm.
teachers were all there and I was able to meet them, which is just completely
Intimate.
different than university.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always thought, you know what, I'll try college. If it's not something that I want to do, at least I'm not spending 4 years of my life
Hmm.
and 50,000 plus dollars, to go to school. At least now I can move out. I could have everything. Like I was completely fully paid off by the
Hmm.
end of me graduating, which was amazing. Thanks to my
Hmm.
parents, not me, but
Yeah.
they'd saved enough. But yeah, so when I walked in, it was just instantly, I told my parents, I'm like, I have to go here. Like, this is
Hmm.
100% what I want to do. Now, when I was actually sitting in the classes, 18-year-old, 17-year, 18-year-old me, I was like, what did I decide to do? Like, they're talking
Yeah.
about, oh, you guys should all know about this, and you should know about construction, and, this kind of material mixes with this. And I'm like, what? And like even the math was different, right? I had taken
Hmm.
all university based schooling. So now taking that kind of
Applied.
applied,
Yeah.
yeah, was just, oh my God. I thought that I was smart, but it's
No,
a
it's
different kind of smart.
it's a different level. And like just jargon alone, because like my next kind of question, but before we jump into that, I
Yeah.
just more like also wanted to speak on like the financial independence part. And like I think that part is such a cool part of your story too, of making that decision to being like, okay, well, this is a decision that could get me advanced really quickly. Like I can become an expert and I can like all of a sudden be applicable in the real world setting within like a year, 2 years. And
Yeah.
even though fashion is still my life, I can still do that on the side and it can be a hobby that can be supported by something that's
Yes.
financially viable like right away at 19. Like that's
Exactly.
pretty
Exactly.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm very happy with that decision because it's given me a lot more freedom in my life. The first couple
Mhm.
years I had to really dedicate my time to work. I still do dedicate a lot of my time to work, but
Yeah.
weekends are for me. So I still paint and I do some fashion stuff here and there, but
Mm.
yeah.
Oh no, that's pretty amazing. But I do love that like callback of like the different type of intelligence and like I could imagine how scary those first like couple months probably was because like usually in this type of education, usually the students are a little bit older. Like I know in geology, most people like start around like 30. They've probably
Yeah.
gone into forestry first, realized maybe it wasn't the best fit, and then gone into geology. So I'm sure it was very similar that like you were sitting around with people already in the industry that's probably talking all in acronyms. And then you're there as 17-year-old girl being like, oh my God.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. And a lot of people had already done it for their summer classes. I
Mm,
took the blasting program first. So most of my program actually went through a common first semester where they get
okay.
to learn 8 or 9 different programs within the college just in case they decide to change their mind, which is, I think, a great idea. But I had already had set, like, I
We're
am
going.
doing drilling. So I got the blasting certificate in a year, which I got to skip the common first. I did the second semester in the summer, and then I graduated the next year. So doing my third and fourth, and then
Wow.
yeah.
And then
So
on from
I
that.
yeah. So when I had already started, there was a lot of men that had already gone through their first, and most of them had this was their second career. So they
Mm,
were 20, 25, 30, some were in their 50s.
mhm.
So it was just I was one of 4 women
Mm.
out of like 100 and some odd men, 120 men or something.
Oh my
So
goodness.
yeah.
It takes guts, man. Like it takes more than guts. It takes just like I think pure like I don't know what type of energy it is, but it's of high caliber because I don't know if I could have done that at that age of walked into a class. I already found it difficult being in like geology or biology, and there was a lot more women at university. It peters out in terms of industry once you get into mining, then you'll step in
Right.
and you'll be like, okay, I'm one of four. But like
Yeah. Yeah.
at university, it's usually more 50-50. How did you go, Rachel, from Fleming when you graduated? Did you go straight into industry? Because your specialty is like geotechnical and environmental drilling. before we get into kind of maybe definitions of what those are and like what does that actually mean in terms of responsibility, did you go straight there? Did you like all of a sudden graduate and you're like, okay, I'm working up northern Canada, like at a mine, or how did that work?
So in my program, we learned about, I think, 8 or 9 different types of drilling.
Mm,
So there's construction drilling, water well drilling, geotech, environmental, HDD, blast hole drilling.
mm.
So lots of different types. Those are what are kind of filled out throughout the semesters. So my actual first goal was to get into construction drilling
Mm.
because it was unionized. So I figured
Okay.
unionized would protect me as a woman.
Hmm.
It pays a little bit better, and I'd be able to work myself up fairly within the industry. So that was kind of like my first
Smart.
goal, but they didn't hire.
Uh,
And they were very specific on who they hired. And at the time, they weren't really hiring, at least I would say, young women.
mm,
I think 1 or 2 women did end up transitioning into construction drilling, but it took
mm.
a long time. And it's still a work in progress because
Yeah.
I've gone to interviews since then and they've said, we've never hired one, so we're not really sure how this will go.
Oh,
And it's like,
yeah.
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So I had 3 opportunities to go out and pursue geotech environmental
Okay.
drilling right after I graduated college.
Mm.
So at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take what I can get, see
Yeah.
how it goes. I went with a very well-known company. And yeah, so I graduated on the 28th of April and I started my job on May 1st. So it was like
2 days
right
later.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was out in the field working.
Oh my goodness.
And it took me a little bit of time to kind of get used to the job because again, even going from
Hmm.
being in a classroom setting to then being shoved out on site in the middle of a field with
Hmm.
nothing is very, very different. I'm sure you've experienced something similar, right? I couldn't imagine going from university to then being pushed out in the field. That would be crazy.
Yeah, it was a little shock. My first one was 19, and I went from like a university to like northern Canada mining camp. And I actually lived with the drillers because they ran out of student housing. So there was a group of Chibougamau diamond drillers, and they're like, you're going to live with them. They only spoke like very, very accented Quebecois. And it was just like me at 19 being like, oh my goodness. It's like, oh, it was a complete shock. And like, maybe that's where we'll go next, Rachel, is like, could you explain that shock and that experience? And then maybe like when you first, now you're graduated, you're a geotechnical driller and an environmental driller. What does that mean? And then like, what do you have to do every day? You probably didn't even know when you first came out. You're probably like, what is my role here in the middle of this field?
Yeah, thankfully I started off as an assistant
Okay.
and I was with another assistant and a driller.
Mm.
So I needed that because I think I don't know, the first 3 to 4 weeks, I was sitting washing stuff because I was like, everything is way too heavy. It is
Mm.
way too hot.
Mhm.
I don't have proper PPE. Like I should have come more prepared. And it was a lot to take in. And I feel really bad. I'm still connected with most of my first drillers that I had.
Mm.
And man, I always tell them I'm so sorry for what you had to deal with when I first started. Because then when you transition into a driller and you get a brand new person that doesn't know
Mhm.
anything, it's so frustrating. And so I feel horrible for those people, but they gave me a lot of knowledge and they gave me a
Mm.
lot of hands-on skills that I didn't actually start taking anything that I learned from college until I started drilling really. Because the
Mhm.
first thing was, okay, I have to learn everything that my driller needs at this time.
Yeah.
And so with geotech environmental, it's kind of just you're collecting samples, you're going into either areas that have never been developed or developed areas and then checking for contamination.
Mhm.
So you're just kind of going all over the place. It's phase 1s, phase 2s, before projects get started. So it was a lot to learn. I felt like I was doing 5 or 6 jobs all at once, and it took a while. I'll tell you
Yeah.
that.
Well, I think you probably were. Like, whenever I would go out to the drill and go, like, because usually a geo has to be there and like inspect the rocks and the
Yep,
little clippings that are coming
yep,
up, and
yep,
like we just kind of hang out. But like, whenever you're at the drill rig, one, it's huge, it's big,
yep,
it's really noisy, it's really like, it smells like diesel. There's so many moving parts to it. But like, when nothing is going wrong, it is a job of 10 jobs, and every you have to be on top of everything. You have to move
yeah,
bits and pieces, you have to figure out your depth. Most of it is also what has always blown me away by drilling, and I don't know how this learning curve happened for you or what was even that process like, but a lot of it is by lived experience of sound and sight and like
yeah,
feel on the tools of just like being like, okay, yep, we're snagged. We're in this
yeah,
formation. Oh, yep, I
yeah.
just heard it. We hit shirt. And you're like, what do you mean you
What?
just
Yeah.
heard shirt? Like, how did you do that, you magical man? Like, I don't know where
Yeah,
we are
yeah,
and I'm supposed to be the one with the map. Like,
yeah.
how did that happen? Because, like, that lived experience of drilling is something pretty incredible that I don't think happens in other industries.
Yeah, it's totally sound and feel. Like when I started drilling, if I didn't have a machine with a stand where
Mm,
you were actually standing on top and feeling, I would put my foot up on wherever I could just so I could feel the rig.
mm,
And sometimes it would be something so small, like you take your headphones or whatever, your earplugs out just to listen to what's happening for like 2 seconds. Sometimes it's just the sound the machine's making, right? Like
mhm,
you're gonna get stuck if it's just like starting to go, whoa, and it's just like, nope,
mhm.
stop, pull up, like put it in reverse, whatever you need to do, which you shouldn't always do, but just small things like that. And it sucks to say, but I had to learn the hard way a lot of times
Mhm.
because I started operating when I was 21
Oh, wow.
and it was too fast. I'll say that for me. I'm glad that I did because it's gotten me to where I am now. And again, like I had really supportive people around
Mhm,
me that allowed me to get up into that position. But there were many times that I
mm,
was out there going, what is happening? And
mhm.
again, like I'm sure it was the same with
Oh,
when you
yeah.
were doing the mining, like you're your own mechanic. There's
Mhm.
nobody fixing anything for you. You're
No.
doing it yourself. And especially when I started, they were sending me out. I was working at a smaller company that didn't have a lot of experienced
Mm,
helpers and assistants. So I was out there training people that also didn't really speak English most of the time
mhm.
by myself,
On
like
your own. Yeah. Do the
trying to
best you
figure out
can.
yeah,
Yeah.
trying to figure out the
Yeah.
geology that I'm dealing with because maybe the technician that I was working with or the because most of them in Toronto here aren't geologists or
Mhm.
hydrogeologists or anything like that. Most of them are technicians or they're civil
Mm,
engineers that are trying to get into something else, but they start at the bottom or project
mhm.
managers, they have to start in the field. So a lot of these people don't even want to be there. You're
Oh, no.
trying to tell them why you're stuck or
Yeah.
what's happening or why you can't get your well installed properly because there's cave in or whatever. So it was a lot of back and forth and trying to figure out, okay, like how can I be professional? How can I train my next person? How can I get the job done really well? And how can I get this client to want to call
Mhm,
me back for future? Because
mhm.
that's the best that's the best
Yeah,
thing,
that's the
right?
best thing. Yeah, exactly,
For
to
them
have
to
another
say,
contract.
I want to work
Mhm.
with Rachel,
Yeah.
There's not many Rachels out there drilling, so
Yeah.
yeah, my name either went very far in a good way
Mhm.
or I had a bad day and everybody knew about it. So
Yeah. I think that that's a good call though on like living on site of like having a bad day and everybody knowing it, because I feel like that is kind of a part of parcel of like remote work or field work, because I think you brought it up perfectly is like you are your own mechanic. I know like we'd be in the middle of the ocean drilling, and if a part broke, we're like, we're not going in. It's going to take us 2 weeks to go to land. Like, we
yeah.
better make something here. Like, we better like,
Yeah.
and you would just see all of the drillers yelling and screaming, and like it again also like accents and from all over the world as well. So it would
Yeah.
also be this like kind of crash course in problem solving and communication and people management and resource management. Like your ability to go into a problem and fix it is probably bar none, and like it's
Mhm.
fantastic work experience, but like also a very, very stressful part of your job, I could
Yes.
imagine.
Yes, it was. When I was out there trying to fix machines, it was brutal. And I'm still fixing machines, but from the office now.
Mm,
So the guys will call me with an issue, and right away I'm like, try this, do
hmm.
this, like I kind of have everything memorized in a way. I went through kind of all the breakdown issues with it. So it's
Yeah.
like, this is your problem. This is probably the solution. Try this, then call me back. And most of the time, they're like, yeah, you're right.
It worked.
Sometimes they're like, nope, still something, and it's like, ah, okay, we'll figure it out. So yeah,
Mm.
I appreciate getting that experience then because it allowed me to kind of do what I need to do now.
And your role now at the office as a general manager, which congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
What does that look like? Because do you go into the field at all to do any like QA/QC or training, or are you just really responsible of like, these are all of our rigs. This is like are working with these clients. We're doing these wells. Is it more like a managerial or project manager position?
To be honest, it's everything.
Okay.
We're we're a very small company. I think we're like 10 people.
Mm.
So I actually do everything and anything. I do the health and safety for the company, I do the hiring, I do the firing, I do the
Oh
training,
my goodness.
I do ordering, maintenance, invoices, estimates, scheduling of the guys,
You're running the
um,
company. That
social
is
media.
yeah, you're running the company at this point. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Okay, so it's a
So
little bit of everything.
it is hard for me to get out on site this year. I want to spend more time going out on site. A lot of the guys have been trained just by what I've said or
Mhm.
through other people that have worked at the company with previous experience. But all the guys that we currently have right now have either learned from myself or the other manager who's also, he has a lot of knowledge with drilling. He's been drilling for 20 years.
Oh wow.
So they've either learned through us, other drillers that we've had that have come in and out. But right now, all the guys that we have been trained from us, except for one, which is
Mm.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
So having that ability to say like we bred these drillers, from the
The ground
ground.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly from where they are now. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it is kind of, I've had the debate back and forth, and drillers, especially geotech environmental, there's like 80 ways to do one thing.
Mm.
And so you get a lot of people butting heads when they think that they know the best. And I can even do the same, right? I've had
Mhm.
a good experience in this type of material,
Mm.
doing it this way. And then the next person can say, well, I've done it this way and it's faster and it's better. But then we can have the discussion like, I've had this bad experience happen to me
Because we
before
went
when
too
I
fast.
tried it that
Yeah.
way.
Mhm.
So maybe it's not the smartest or the safest or whatever. So
Mhm.
you have those people because, and I think you get into it a little bit later, but just because there's no standard
Mhm.
guidelines or actual, like, here's your certificate, you know how to do this, it's kind of gotten to that point. So I like the fact that I work with a lot of guys that are still learning and they're all willing to learn. And that's kind of
Mhm.
what I want to do this year. I want to go out and experience kind of what they're going through. I want to take more photos, take more videos, spend time with them. But it is hard to kind of manage my time when I'm supposed to be in the office dealing with clients and
Doing a
projects
million
and
things. Yeah.
everything else. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, my goodness, because it isn't like that's the thing with this type of drilling. It's so my understanding of it at least is that it's so dependent on a natural systems, and natural systems are like notoriously obviously not consistent. They're a natural system. They're never
Yeah,
going to be a
yeah.
consistent thing. But I could see it being a little all over the place of being like, okay, what do you do in this situation and what works and what doesn't? And it's crazy that you're doing so many jobs. I love that goal for this year when we're talking about training them and making sure like getting things working correctly or maybe not working correctly, could we define that for somebody who hasn't worked in drilling? Like, could we conceptualize that of being like, what does it look like when something goes well? And then what does it look like when we're talking about getting stuck? What does that
Yeah.
actually mean?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, Ontario is such a diverse area for geology. I'm sure
Hmm.
that with the
Shield.
horseshoe, right?
Hmm.
And the shield. Yeah. So, I mean, we're mostly in southern Ontario, which is good. We're not getting up into because the north can just be a whole different ball game, right? But with a day going well is the guys are prepared, they go out, they have their machine, they're ready to go. Most of the time we're drilling, depending if it's a small job or a large job, say a 1 day job, we're doing anywhere between 4 holes to 6 holes.
Mm.
And a lot of the time in the area, it's very shallow auger holes just to
Mm.
collect samples to know kind of what's in the ground. So if it's topsoil and then sand and then clay and then say shale.
Mm-hmm.
So right away they know if they want to put a 17-story building right there,
Mm.
they have some sort of foundation that they can drill into. And then sometimes people will come back for the coring, so to actually get the rock samples. Sometimes we'll go back to install monitoring wells if they
Mm.
did find some sort of maybe contamination, and then that way they can monitor the water table. So it really depends day to day. Every day is different. But yeah, having the guys prepared, knowing what they need to do, getting their machines, knowing the geology maybe
Yeah.
beforehand is good. Having multiple types of equipment so that they're ready to go if they need to use solids
Switch
or
it up.
hollows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that they're good and then they know exactly what needs to happen. And then just having the guys know kind of the soils that they're drilling into, that's super important instead of them just being like, it's dirt, it's gray dirt, it's brown dirt. Like, no, it's silt, it's clay, it's silty clay,
Yes.
like they need to know
It's a
that stuff.
difference. Yes, they do.
Yes, exactly. So we call them drillers versus operators.
Mm.
Anybody can operate a machine.
Mm.
Anybody can operate a drill rig after a couple hours. But to actually be considered a driller, you need to know what you're talking about above ground, below ground,
Mm-hmm.
and everywhere in between. That's kind of what makes you a driller.
Mm.
So, but when you don't know your soil conditions or you don't know how the machine reacts, that's when it becomes a mess. When
Yeah.
you're not communicating back and forth with the actual technician, geologist, hydrogeologist,
Mm-hmm.
civil engineer, whoever you're dealing with, right? There can be a ton of issues that come up because maybe they want something changed and
Mm-hmm.
you don't feel like doing it, or that wasn't on the scope, so why am I going to change this? It's like, no, you have to be able to kind of work with them and see how you can actually get this job done correctly for them because they don't know what's below the surface
No,
and that's
that's
why
why
you're
they're
there.
here. Yeah, exactly. That's why your job exists, is to go underneath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's some of the most frustrating things when I hear when somebody's like, that's not my job. Like they should have thought about that beforehand. It's like,
That's the
no,
industry.
no, no. That is
Yeah.
how this works. That is how this works.
Mm.
So that's, I guess that's one of the things that makes me really upset. Or just when the guys aren't prepared, when
Mm.
they just, something happens.
Yeah.
But other than that, we're usually able to get it figured out, fix it.
Mm.
Again, we're not so far out of the bush that like we can't get to you within days times. So we try to figure it out as best we can. So every day's a good day, I'll say
Yeah.
that.
It might be hectic, but every end's a day.
Yeah.
No, thank you. And thank you for spending some time on it, because I wanted to be cognizant of this interview specifically. I was like, could be one that you just go and you don't describe anything because you're just like way too gung ho to be like, okay, let's talk about silty mud for like 10
Yeah,
minutes. So I was
yeah.
like, okay, let's make sure that we bring it back. So thank you for kind of like walking through what you actually do and like what you do as a day to day and what it looks like when you were on the rig versus now as a general manager kind of running the show, and what does success look like, and what does maybe a bad day look like.
Hmm.
In terms of general industry, I think that this is something that it's a pet peeve of mine, and it's been a pet peeve of mine for a while, is I think sometimes people don't realize the role of drilling and in terms of environmental science and in terms of sustainability and climate science. And I think sometimes they don't realize that these two industries go hand in hand. And in order to
Yeah.
get environmental science data and climate science data, a lot of geology is really reliant on drilling. And I was wondering if we could talk about that, because I think drilling, I think you guys get a very, very dirty label. And I think that there's
Hmm.
probably a bunch of misconceptions about your role in terms of environmentalism. And you're like, no, that's my entire job is
Yeah.
geotechnical and environmental drilling. That's
Yeah.
that's why I exist, to try to figure out if this has actually been contaminated. So I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think Depending on the person, for me, I love the environmental aspect of
Mm-hmm.
it. I'm doing more and more research as I can. I've been in the industry to kind of figure out, okay, why are we doing this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
before I used to just go out, this is my job, I have to focus on this.
Yeah.
And then when I started operating, it was like, okay, now I just have to focus on this. But now that I'm kind of overall like looking at it as a big picture, I realize more and more, okay, there's so much more behind the scenes that goes into
Mm-hmm.
this that actually we have a great impact on the environment,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's we're out there with our machine making sure that everything's clean and we're not
Mm-hmm.
cross contaminating,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a huge thing that does happen. And we're just starting to get into that. The industry's getting better. But also the fact that we're installing wells into groundwater. So if we're not sealing holes properly, we're
Mm-hmm.
allowing all of the surface water or contamination or whatever to actually seep down into drinking water, which can affect many people
Mm-hmm.
across
Yeah.
a small area, a large area. So it's really important that the people actually behind the machines know that they're getting involved in this, but
Mm-hmm.
also for other people to look at us and not just go, "You're drilling for oil today?" It's
Yeah.
like, no, I'm not.
No.
But you wouldn't want to know that because,
Yeah.
yes, maybe your site is very contaminated with oil, but I'm not going to tell you that, you know? But there's a lot of delineation that goes into us doing different types of drilling. So we can actually find out from just poking a couple holes in the ground, as everybody says, finding where the contamination may
Mm-hmm.
start and where it may stop. So that way they're not spending millions of dollars excavating an entire lot. They're just maybe having to excavate that small little area.
Mm-hmm.
They've also started to do direct push and what is the word? Where they shoot different types of slurries and stuff
Oh,
down the
okay.
hole.
Oh,
And
cool.
it actually, yeah, and it helps. I think it's carbon,
Yeah.
and it actually
Probably or
helps
like
to,
bitumen or like something. Yeah.
and it removes the contamination
Mm.
slowly over time so that they don't have to do
Mm.
injection sites. So there's a ton of that going on in the drilling industry. And then, I mean, geothermal is starting to become
Mm-hmm.
huge in the United States. PFAS is a huge thing as well. So more and more, it's going to start coming out that drilling is actually benefiting the environment
Mm-hmm.
and that we are trying to do more work to assist creating renewable energy,
Mm-hmm.
providing clean drinking water. Like there's going to be a time that that's going to be very difficult for us to get. Mining, right, up
Mm-hmm.
north, even though I don't touch on that at all, but it's a huge thing. And some
Mm-hmm.
geotech drillers do end up going into the mining field because they've done coring
Yeah.
before. So
Yeah.
we
It's
do the
similar.
coring here
Mm-hmm.
for geotech purposes, but then they end up going up north and then they do the
Mm-hmm.
coring for different types of metals and earth material, the
Yeah.
cool stuff.
Hey, what you guys do is cool
Yeah.
too. But no, thank you, because I think you bring up a good point of like one, what you guys are actually as an industry and your role within the industry on like a large scale, like you're there for the first step of environmental, like the first step of like renewable energy. And if we're looking at like rare earth elements, or if we're looking at something that goes into renewables, they're going to have to be mined and they're going to have to be
Yep.
drilled. But then I think
Yep.
you're also bringing back a big point with hydrogeology and monitoring and injection wells of being like, we're
Yep.
also there to clean up past contamination,
Yes.
and we're one of the only ones within our industry that can actually go in and like look at what is contaminated. It's a
Yeah.
tool to understand contamination, and it's a tool to actually be able to do environmental science that you can't do from the surface if you don't have access to the water table, if you have access to that
Right.
data. So
Right.
I
Or
just
it's
think,
very expensive. Very,
yes,
very expensive.
yeah, yep.
So, yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up because, yeah, a lot of the time, again, I'm standing in from your Instagram post that you posted to me, I had people commenting, like, are you always that dirty? And it's just like, usually, yes.
Yeah.
But like what we're doing isn't horrible for the environment.
Mm-mm.
We're not fracking or doing anything that'll be
No.
destructive for long periods of time. We're trying to go in to do a small portion to get an understanding of kind of what's around us in that specific spot. So a lot of people hate drillers, whether it's public or, the private sectors, because we're kind of in the way, we're making things difficult, but we're trying to actually
You're
assist people
fundamental.
in the end.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. You're like fundamental. You're like the first step that you need to have access. And then you
Literally.
can get data. You can't have data
Yes.
without access. Like you guys are like the first like boots on the ground to try to understand science. One
Yes.
funny thing
Yes.
about like how you mentioned you're like, oh yeah, like some people like yell at me until I realize that like I'm actually helping them is
Yeah.
I worked on a deep sea drilling rig and we studied climate change. It was a US government program called IODP. We were sailing into New Zealand and there was a huge protest that the local town had done for us because they thought that we were oil and gas, like offshore drilling. And we had to send a message to the port because we weren't going to be allowed access to the port. We had to tell them to be like, no, we study climate change. And then they were like, oh, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. You guys
Like,
can
come
come.
in.
They
You can come in.
come in. But like, they didn't realize to be like, in order to get those rocks, like they have to be drilled. We're
Yeah.
in 3,000 meters of water and then they're
Yeah.
2K down. Like we can
Yeah.
only do that by having this huge drill rig and derrick in the middle of the ship. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. So I really thank you for talking about that. It's something near and dear to my heart that I was like, you guys get a bad rep and you don't deserve it, like at all.
Yeah, even the oil drillers, like
Yeah.
they're out there getting oil so they can drive their cars to the protest, so they can take a bus to the protest, whatever
Yeah.
they're doing, it's still needed.
Hmm.
And it still will be for a long time, I think. I know that we're getting into more and more like trying to get away from that, but I think it'll still be around for a long time. And definitely the type of drilling I will be doing, I
Hmm.
can't see that disappearing for
No,
anytime soon, to be
no.
honest.
I can only see it kind of getting bigger and maybe changing a little bit in scope of having new scopes and like a bigger
Yes.
reach throughout the industry, but I don't think you guys are going away
No.
anytime soon at all. One other kind of misconception, and this is jumping a little bit, but it's when you said that you first started Fleming and you were like one of four. I've worked in this industry for a very long time and I've never met a female driller. Could we maybe talk to kind of your experience maybe starting and then now as a female driller in terms of kind of culture and any misconceptions that are either coming from inside the industry or outside of the industry? Because I think you're still in one of those roles that's still regarded as, like you said with the job interview, that they're like, well, you'd be our very first that we've ever had, so we're just going to say no because we don't
Yeah.
know what to deal with you. Like you're definitely a pioneer and it's crazy in 2024 that you're a pioneer, but you're probably one of, I would say they can't be more than 50 in Canada. Like you probably know every single female driller in Canada.
I know most of them, yeah.
Yeah.
I know most of
Yeah.
them, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to find more of them, but yeah, there's only a few, and for sure I think it all kind of starts from where you start off in
Mm.
college, and that was kind of where I started. I was like, okay, this is gonna be all men, 100%, and I want to set myself up to be known as who I am
Hmm.
for a good
Myself.
reason, and
Yeah.
for me to get myself to the position that I want to be in without getting help from anybody or getting it a certain way that I maybe shouldn't have.
Mm.
So that's from day one, college, when I saw all those men, I was like, I will never date or have
Yeah.
any sort of relations with any men that I work with,
Hmm.
potentially could work with in my industry in general.
Hmm.
And that was my first, this is my line. There's no gray area. It's black
This
and
is it.
white. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my first rule because I didn't ever want to have a relationship with somebody that could be potentially my boss
Hmm.
one day.
Hmm.
Or for me to have a relationship with maybe somebody I could be their boss one day. So
Yeah.
that was kind of my first thing. And then after that, when I graduated, a lot of the guys that I worked with were very understanding of the fact that I was a woman. So it was
Hmm.
going to take me some time to kind of understand what I was doing. And not all of them were the
Kind.
best.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had some, obviously, I feel like every single woman has had an issue with harassment. So,
Mhm.
like, it happens. And
Mhm.
whether you're in a corporate or you're blue collar, whatever, like, I feel like most people are dealing with it and we're getting better. And as men grow older, they'll realize that it's ridiculous that
Mhm.
this is still happening.
Mhm.
But to be honest, like 99% was good and it
Good.
was positive.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just got to the point where I was in my position as an assistant and I just didn't think that I was going to be moving up. There was already a lot of very knowledgeable men that were up ahead of me.
Mm.
So I just kind of was like, okay, let me look for something else. And a woman actually reached out to me and she said, we have a drilling division. We would like you to be a driller.
Amazing.
Like, ugh, I don't know how to
Okay.
do that, but sure. Yeah, fake it till you make it, right? I was like, I could do that. I've been watching people do this. I went to school for this. Of course I can
Yeah.
do it.
Yes, you
Then I
can.
got out there and I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? And that company, I worked with some really, really good people because that was my second company I worked with. And everybody in the office was very supportive, but I
Mm.
worked with a lot of men from different countries.
Mm.
So that was very difficult for them to kind of
Yeah.
understand, like, yes, you're a woman. Yes, you're capable of doing this. No, I don't need to do everything for you.
Mhm.
But then to be honest, like I know that some people are like, oh, the guys want to do this for me. I started letting them do whatever they wanted to do. I was like, sure, grab that bag, go and
Yeah.
do this.
I
I
did the
used
same
it to
thing. Yeah.
I used it to my advantage. Like, I don't need to prove anything.
No.
Like, I know I can do it. If
Mhm.
they're not willing to help me, for sure, I'll do it by myself.
Mhm.
But if they're more than willing to pick up a 50-pound bag of something just to
Go for it.
prove to me that you can do it,
Go for it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, my blessing.
please,
Yeah.
please save
There's
my back.
there's 10 of them that we have to move in like an hour. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, go for
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't know. And that was kind of just my mentality. It was like,
Mm.
once I was there and I was experiencing it, it was like, why am I going to fight to prove? Like, I know what I can do.
Yeah. Not everything has
Management,
to be a battle. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
management knows what I
yeah.
can do. And sometimes, like, the guys that I would be working with were kind of on the same level as me.
Mm.
They were older than me, but they had the same experience, if not more.
Mm.
So I would go out and they would say, I want to drill today because you're not drilling. And I said, okay, fine, go ahead.
Mhm.
I'll be your helper then. And then they would be lifting up all the heavy stuff because they didn't want to watch me do it. So I'm like,
Mhm.
just let me drill and
Yeah.
then you can be the laborer and then we can just, so that's kind of what led me to actually starting and being on the rig all the time was because the men didn't want to watch me work.
Oh my goodness.
Which is
That's
kind of crazy.
yes, it is. It's like an Uno reverse card by definition. Like their whole whether it was intentional or malicious, like their whole maybe bias or sexism actually brought you ahead to be like, you know what, I
Yeah, it
actually ended up
did.
having more responsibility and
Yes.
a bigger role within this interaction because it was all based on this idea that the physical task was the most important. And like,
Yeah.
I don't know about you. This is how I've always felt with physical tasks is am I going to be the best at that job of lifting? Like if it's a competition of lifting a 50-pound bag, am I going to be the best at it? No. But
Hmm.
can I do
Hmm.
it? Yes. Like it
Yeah, of
but it
course.
is it
Yeah.
the most important part of the job? Also no.
No.
So it's okay. Like I found I would do the same thing that I would play to a strength to be like, okay, well I know I can lift that bag, but like it probably will look a little different than the other guy doing it, which is totally
Yeah.
fine. But
Yeah.
if he wants to haul, we're here for 2 months. If he wants to
Yeah.
move that bag every single day, he has my blessing. Like,
Please,
yeah.
yes. Well, and that's the other thing. I'm 6'1".
Mm,
So I am not a petite little woman. I was working with most men that I worked with were actually smaller
mm.
and shorter than me. So it was kind of like,
It's a funny thing then that's on top of it that you're like, okay, then why is this idea that you think that
yeah,
I can't do it?
I am much bigger than you. I can do this, but
Yeah.
no, it ended up working out really well. And to be honest, the industry has just continued to surprise me. As I have gotten more experience under my belt, I have seen just so much more positivity.
Good.
And even through my Instagram, just connecting with drillers from the States, I see so many profiles of women putting up videos of them doing HVAC or putting up
Hmm.
videos of them doing plumbing or electrical, whatever, carpentry. And there's always men in the comments like,
Yeah. no
oh,
matter
she doesn't
what.
know how to do that, or
Yeah.
she's doing that wrong, you know? And then I have men in my comments like, oh, that's awesome. Look at you go. You know, like it's a completely different atmosphere, I guess that
Mhm.
you could say, where all the men that I've ever met when it comes to drilling, whether it's the States, and especially the States, they're cowboys. A lot of them are cowboys down there.
I worked with
Like,
nothing but cowboys from Texas, from
yeah.
like West Texas. Those were all of our drillers. They like couldn't understand a word that they were saying, but they were
Yeah.
sweethearts, absolute sweethearts.
And they are, yeah. And
No.
that's the thing, right? Like they're so just down to earth, amazing people. Most of them have grown up with drilling for the
Hmm.
last 3 to 4 generations. You
Yeah.
know, it's just been in the family. So having that opportunity to talk with those people and learn from them, because a lot of people actually from the States and a lot of the older men that I've worked with here have a wealth of knowledge, just
Hmm.
so much information that you can learn from. And I've tried to capture all of it so that I can at least pass it down to the next people that I'm
Hmm.
maybe training, or people even within my age, because just the stuff that I've learned from them is just, it's incredible. They
Hmm.
they know their stuff.
Oh yes, they do. Yeah, they're like
Yeah.
they're better geos than like most geologists. I'll tell that straight up. Like they're
Yeah.
usually like they usually know what's happening underground more than we do. And maybe it's because of my next question, and like maybe that's the answer of why this culture exists like that, is because it's not really regulated and there's no guidebook. It is this very familial industry. It's definitely like a
Mhm.
passed on industry, and I feel like there's this undercurrent of teaching, like more
Yes.
so than just a standard like apprentice to journeyman to red seal in Canada, but like not even from like the trades perspective, but it still has that apprentice like master kind of relationship, but there's definitely this undercurrent of teaching, and I feel like that's kind of common in all drilling. And this
Mhm.
blew me away when you told me this little fact, because I know that you're passionate about like getting drilling recognized as a skilled trade, and I
Yeah.
kind of just thought that it had already been a skilled trade. I knew it was mostly like learned by experience and learned by like lived experience, but I still thought that it was registered, that you guys were unionized, that you guys actually were defined in Canada as like a red seal driller. I still just assumed you had to have certification. So what is the status right now of drilling tickets? And like what is that roadmap or that future? What does that look like to become a standardized industry?
So right now, the only ticket I technically have is well, I shouldn't say technically, I do have this.
I
Just to
I
clarify
was like,
that.
I have it in my notes that you got your full well ticket.
I have my full well license, I'll say that. It worked very hard for that. You need 4,000 hours
Oh
to
wow.
complete that. You need to be an assistant underneath a driller with their full well license to be able to get your well
Wow.
license.
Okay.
I mean, are people actually doing that?
Okay, because
Probably not.
it's not really well
It's
maintained.
not
Yeah,
managed.
it's not
No.
managed.
No. So water well drillers, they're seen as a skilled trade, but it's not compulsory. So there's
Oh.
no way to actually hand out a ticket.
Oh,
And
weird.
it's very strange. And when we looked up, because I'm part of the Ontario Groundwater
Mm,
Association Board of Directors, so
amazing.
when they brought that up, I was like, oh, that's super interesting. So I looked into it more because I didn't even know that we were technically
Hmm.
like considered a skilled trade. Well, with the water well
Hmm.
drillers, I'm not a water well driller, but they brought that up, and it's way outdated. I talked to the Skilled Trades Ontario, and they said that nothing's ever even been put in place. They were kind
Oh,
of just like, sure, you can be a skilled
yeah. But
trade,
no one's
and then that
used
was
it.
it.
Yeah,
No,
no one's actually qualified under it. No one's actually like testing it. It doesn't exist at
yeah.
like vocational schools. Nothing.
Yeah,
Okay.
nothing. So it's there, but it doesn't exist. So the OGWA is actually trying to figure out, okay, how can we progress and next
Hmm.
steps with this, right? So that's kind of their side of things. I am the vice president of the National Drilling Association Ontario chapter. Thank you. Which I helped get started in Canada because
Hmm.
it's been in the States for the last 52 years, I think, this year.
Hmm.
So I helped start the first chapter in Canada. this past July. And
Amazing.
so we're now working on, okay, how can we get geotech environmental drillers skilled trade?
Hmm.
So I've been talking with Skilled Trades Ontario for kind of both sides. So like how can we benefit and maybe we can do it together because a
Hmm.
lot of geotech environmental drilling companies are actually starting to bring in water well drills
Yeah.
because they
Again,
know.
your scope is kind of going to increase more and more as we move more environmental. Yes, completely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and they're similar, right?
Hmm.
We're both trying to find water most of the time. So, a lot of the time they're just trying to figure out, okay, like where is the water, and then
You guys
they'll
do
actually
contamination.
drill, and then yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, the we're really hoping it's going to take a long time for
Mm,
sure. My big thing with the National Drilling Association and the OGWA, both sides, I want the people that are actually part of the association to be able to train the next generation.
yeah.
So I think my biggest thing is just because the people I've worked with over the past couple years, they have so much knowledge, like I said
Hmm.
before. They need to be given that platform to share knowledge because
Hmm.
most drillers I know, they're working 12-hour shifts and then they're going home and they don't want to talk about it.
Oh, obviously not. No, you're working too long. Too
Yeah,
long. Hmm.
but the best time to figure out is at the end of the day when they're tired,
Hmm.
you go out to a bar, you hang out,
Yeah.
and you learn a ton of stuff about drilling because it's after hours, they're not
Hmm.
at work, but they want to share all their
Hmm.
experiences, all their stories. And we have a massive gap of people. Most drillers that I know are 40
Yeah.
plus.
They're about to retire. There's going to be a huge shortage of drilling. Yes, that's a very, very
Yeah,
good point. Hmm.
and there's people I'm only 26
Hmm.
and there's people that are like my age and younger, a couple people in their 30s, but most of the time, especially nowadays, the guys are getting out of it and going to a different type of construction or
Mm.
a different type of trade that's easier, not as long of days, they don't have to
Unionized.
deal with it,
Yeah.
unionized,
Protected.
they
Yeah.
have tickets, they
Yeah.
have whatever they need, whereas like here it's very different, right?
Hmm.
You're working towards something and then you kind of get to that top of being a driller. And then a lot of people are like, there's no more growth. Like,
Hmm.
there's nowhere else for me to go.
Yeah.
And that's what I see a lot of like the drillers and even assistants that I've worked with or that I've hired, a lot of them are like, you know what? This isn't for me. And then they
Hmm.
get out. So it's like, how can we keep those very skilled and trained people
In it.
to want to stay? And
Yeah.
the biggest thing that I think is just being able to work towards something,
Mm.
being able to say, yes, I'm a red seal driller. It sounds ridiculous to say it out loud, but
No, but it's amazing. It would be good if that actually does exist. It's safer,
yeah,
it's more stable. I think too, like a big problem with you guys not being standardized or a skilled trade or recognized as a skilled trade is with the union and with Red Seal and with like teaching opportunities, you have the ability to have a new career and a new job once your body can't handle being on the tools,
yeah,
because there is definitely a within these industries, they're so hard on your body. Again, we were just joking about moving
yeah,
50-pound
yeah,
bags like it's nothing. You can't do that at like
yeah,
62. Like you do
no,
kind of need that next step of career ladder to be like, okay, well, a board of directors on like a drilling board or a drilling
hmm,
union would be like the perfect next step, or like an
yeah,
instructor position or something
yeah,
more formalized. And if that
yeah,
doesn't exist because you guys aren't skilled trades, it kind of does make sense that people are leaving the industry. But it's a huge problem because you guys are found
yeah,
like fundamental to
I know,
everything. Construction, natural resources, drilling is the, again, boots on the ground. So if
yeah.
you guys don't have anybody to put into those rigs, the entire industry, like all of Canada, will be rocked by it.
Yeah, yeah, it's very important. I wish that I could get
Preach
out
it.
there
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
and preach
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I try. I go to like high schools. I do
Mm,
seminars. I do like videos like this all the time to try to encourage more students. Kind of the way that I was encouraged. Like
mhm.
a 30-second conversation to a
Yeah.
group of people about drilling, and I just want it to be like, oh, that's really cool. I think it's just people in general in drilling. That's kind of
Yeah.
my push. I don't care what you are,
We'll take anybody. We just
come
need
on
people.
in. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's just people sticking with it and people actually being passionate about it, because
Mm.
it's a career. It's not just something that you can just do every day.
Mm-mm.
Like, you have to love it to
Yeah.
do it. You can't just come in here and be like, this is my job, like a
Oh
lot of
no.
other jobs are like that, especially with trades like concrete form. Like, a lot of them just come in, they want a paycheck, and they go home. They do their
Mm.
8 hours, their 9 hours, whatever. Obviously, not all concrete formers, but
Yeah.
just as example, it's what my husband does. So he works his 8.5 hour shift, and he gets to go home. And
Yeah.
that's not drilling. Like, you're
Mm-mm.
out there. If you run into a problem, like some sort of flowing aquifer or something, that's just, you have to fix that and stop that.
Right away. Yeah. You're there for 3
Like,
days if you don't. Like you're
yeah, it does
yeah.
not matter. You're not
Yeah.
going home. You
No.
don't get a break. That's how the construction industry is in general.
Yeah.
Like, Employment Standards Act, like, technically you're not allowed breaks.
Yeah.
If you have to get something done, you have to do it.
It's so foundational. It's such a wonderful industry. I think it's a wonderful career that can take you a lot of places. I think we didn't touch on it, but like drilling has to be one of the ones that's the most easy to travel with and
Oh
to
yeah.
go all over the world. If you would like to
Yep.
have adventures on adventures and financial stability, like drilling
Yep.
is a wonderful option in that
Hmm.
sense. So I just think it's a fantastic occupation. I'm so happy that you're bringing more kind of energy and recognition to it. I really hope that we can get to standardization. It's crazy that you guys are not skilled trades.
Yeah.
And I hope that that's the next future of it because you guys deserve it.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I think it's a great industry, and I mean, that's my passion, is to
Yeah.
just make sure that the next generation, or even the generation after that, has the ability to kind of want to do this as a job and to love it as much as I do, as much as
Yeah.
my 40-year-old best friends, that
Yeah.
are all men. Like, I just hope
Yeah.
the same, that they love that. And again, like, the geologists, the
Mm,
hydrogeologists, they're so passionate about their
mm,
work, and they're out there too with us. And it's like, how can we get that same passion, that same love
mhm.
for rocks into drillers,
Drilling. Yeah,
like
exactly. Yeah. Into the equipment, into like the actual
yeah.
operation. Yeah. You guys are
Yeah.
basically geos in my mind, anyways.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I definitely don't have the credentials for that, but I'll take it.
Well, no, just thank you so much. And like, I really hope that that happens. And like, I agree. Some of the drillers, like, I love some of my like cowboy techs and people that I've worked with. They've been like my favorite people that I've worked on the ship. They've been a pain in my
Hmm.
ass, but they've been like
Yeah.
my favorite. Like you go to go use your computer and you're like, Wayne, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm looking up like basketball because we don't got no
Yeah.
internet. And you're like, cool, get out of my
Yeah.
office. Get out of here. But like absolutely adore them and adore the culture and adore the industry. So thank you very much for
Hmm.
coming on the show and geeking out about drilling for an hour with me. I really appreciate
Yes. No, thank you for having me. I love it,
it.
because it's so different. I never really get to, all the podcasts that I've done, I'm always talking about, like, this is what drilling is, and
Mm,
this is how you can kind of get into it, and this is the future, and this, like, you understand kind of what we're going through. And
mhm.
this might be one of those podcasts that everybody's listening going, what the
What the
heck are
hell
they
just
talking?
happened? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What did they just
Yeah.
say? But I don't care. Honestly, it's my
Yeah.
show. We're going to talk about
Yeah.
drilling for an hour in a very niche way.
And you're gonna like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. No, but
Yeah, no,
thank you.
thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. No, this is awesome. I really enjoyed it.
I did too. It made my night. And thank you if we still have you, if you're still listening, and if you're still following along to being like, yep, I think I understood 10% of that. Well, thank you very much. This has been the Smoko Podcast, and we will see you next week. Thank you. Thank you.